The unusual request, the grand hall of the alien warship, was cold and silent. Lights hung low from the tall ceiling, casting long shadows across the polished metal floor. Human Ambassador James Carter stood alone in the center, feeling hundreds of unseen alien eyes watching him. His heart pounded inside his chest, but his face remained calm. He knew any sign of fear could be dangerous. Before him stood the alien commander, tall and fierce. Her silver armor shimmered under the lights, and her eyes, deep purple, locked onto him with an intensity that made him feel exposed. Her presence was powerful, like standing before a thunderstorm ready to break loose. "Human," she said, her voice deep and commanding. "I insist you inspect my body." James blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. For a moment, silence ruled the hall. No one moved. Even the guards at the corners seemed to freeze. "Excuse me, Commander?" James asked carefully, choosing each word with precision. "You heard me?" she said, stepping closer. Her armor made no sound as she moved, like a predator approaching its prey. "Inspect my body. It is required for our agreement to continue." James swallowed hard. Was this a trap? Was it a test? If he refused, it might insult the aliens and destroy months of delicate peace talks. If he agreed, he could be accused of something worse by his own people. He looked around. Dozens of alien officials lined the shadows, their eyes unreadable. "May I ask?" "Why?" James said, keeping his voice calm. The commander tilted her head slightly, almost like she was studying him too. "Your people demand proof that we are not hiding weapons. My body is my weapon. I offer it for inspection." Her words were logical, but her stare was challenging, daring him to step closer. It was not just a request, it was a command, wrapped inside a test. James felt the weight of the moment. Every decision here would echo back to Earth, to the leaders watching through hidden cameras, to the millions hoping for peace. He took a deep breath and nodded. "Very well," he said softly. The commander removed her outer armor slowly, revealing a bodysuit underneath. It was made of some material James had never seen before, a mix of cloth and living energy. Strange patterns danced across the surface like rivers of light under her skin. He stepped closer, careful to keep his hands to himself. His job was to inspect, not to touch. He leaned in, observing her arms, her chest, her legs. There were no visible weapons. Her body itself seemed engineered for strength and speed. Suddenly, James noticed something. A thin scar ran along her side, almost invisible against her strange skin. It was not recent. It looked old, healed over many years. Yet it told a story that was not meant to be spoken aloud. The commander noticed his gaze. For the first time, her expression changed. Her eyes softened just a little. There was a shadow of pain in her look, quickly hidden. "You have seen enough?" she asked. James hesitated. He had seen enough to know that this was no ordinary warrior. She had been changed, perhaps against her will. She carried more than weapons. In her body, she carried secrets. "I have seen enough," James said finally, stepping back with respect. The commander nodded. Without a word, she began to reassemble her armor. The hall remained silent, but the atmosphere shifted slightly. A ripple of unseen approval passed through the alien officials. As James waited, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had crossed some invisible line, a place where politics ended and something much more dangerous began. He wondered if he had passed their test or if he had simply walked deeper into a trap he could not yet see. When the commander finished, she stepped close once more, close enough that James could hear her quiet words, meant only for him. "You are not like the others," she whispered. "Perhaps there is hope for your kind." Before James could reply, she turned and walked away, her cloak flowing behind her like a river of stars. James stood alone, the heavy silence settling once more over the grand hall. He knew that this was just the beginning. Whatever game had started here today, it was far from over, and deep inside he knew his life would never be the same again. Between duty and danger, James Carter walked slowly down the shining corridor of the alien ship, the memory of the commander's words still burning in his mind. Every step echoed in the hollow space, making him feel even more alone. Around him, the walls shimmered with strange alien technology, alive and humming softly, as if whispering secrets he could not understand. His orders were simple: secure peace between Earth and the Alien Federation. But nothing about this mission felt simple anymore. Why had the alien commander forced such a personal inspection? Why had she shown him that scar? Something clearly meant to stay hidden. James knew one thing: he was being tested. Not just by her, but by the entire Alien Council, and maybe even by his own government, who were no doubt watching every second, through hidden cameras planted in his uniform. As he reached the next chamber, 2 alien guards blocked his path. Their faces were hidden behind silver masks and their weapons glowed faintly at their sides. "You are summoned," one of them said, his voice cold and mechanical. James nodded and followed without a word. Deep inside, his instincts screamed warnings. He was walking into something far more dangerous than he had expected. This was not a negotiation room. This was a battlefield, one fought with words, trust, and betrayal. The doors slid open with a hiss, revealing a dark room lit only by a single blue light in the center. The commander stood waiting, her hands behind her back, her expression unreadable. "Enter, human," she said. James stepped into the room. The door shut behind him, sealing him inside with her. "Do you know why you are here?" she asked, her voice low. James met her gaze. "No, Commander. But I have a feeling it is not to celebrate the inspection." The hint of a smile touched her lips, the first real emotion he had seen from her. "Correct," she said. "You have passed the first test, but that was only the beginning." James kept his breathing steady. "What is the real test, Commander?" She stepped closer, her boots silent on the smooth floor. James could see now, under the armor, under the cold mask, there was a warrior who had survived things he could barely imagine. "We are at war," she said quietly. "Not with you. Not yet. But with those who believe peace with humans is a weakness. There are enemies within my own people." James felt the air grow heavier. This was more than diplomacy. This was espionage, rebellion, maybe even assassination. "I need to know," the commander said, her voice dropping even lower. "If you can be trusted. Truly trusted." James stiffened. "I am a representative of Earth. My loyalty is to my people." "And if your people betray us first?" she asked, stepping even closer. "If they demand your silence, your lies, your loyalty to their politics instead of the truth?" James said nothing. His mind raced. He thought of the scar on her body. He thought of the hidden pain in her eyes. He thought of the millions depending on him to find peace. "What do you want from me?" he finally asked. The commander reached into a hidden pocket of her armor and pulled out a small object, a glowing crystal pulsing with life. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "This," she said, holding it out, "is a key to knowledge your leaders crave. Weapons, technology, cures for your deadliest diseases, all of it hidden inside." James stared at the crystal, feeling the weight of it even from a distance. With that in his hands, he could change the future of Earth. He could end wars, save lives. "But," the commander said sharply, "it is also a curse. Once you accept it, you will no longer be just an ambassador. You will become a part of something bigger, something dangerous." James felt the floor tilt under him. Was this a gift? A trap? Or both? "I will give this to you," the commander said, her eyes boring into his soul. "If you swear loyalty not to governments but to truth itself." Silence filled the room. The crystal pulsed in her hand, matching the beat of James's heart. Accepting it could make him a hero, or a traitor. Refusing it could doom Earth to endless ignorance and war. "Choose," the commander whispered. "Choose, now." James stood frozen, the fate of 2 worlds balancing on his next move. Somewhere deep inside, he realized, he was already past the point of no return. The inspection begins. James stared at the glowing crystal in the alien commander's hand, It pulsed with a slow, steady light, as if breathing. He could almost feel it calling to him, whispering promises of power, knowledge, and danger. His fingers itched to take it. But he hesitated. Why me? Why trust a human, especially one they had only just met? The commander seemed to read his hesitation. Without a word, she turned and motioned him to follow. The heavy doors at the back of the room slid open, revealing a dark passage. No guards, no cameras, just darkness. James felt the hairs on his neck rise. He knew this was the real test. Not the public inspection, not the speeches. This was the heart of the matter. Either he would earn their trust, or he would disappear, swallowed by the ship's endless halls. Taking a deep breath, James followed her into the dark. The passage twisted and turned. Strange symbols glowed faintly, along the walls, shifting and changing as he passed. He had the unsettling feeling that the ship was alive, watching, judging. After what felt like hours, they reached another door. This one was different, ancient-looking, with deep scars across its surface. The commander placed her hand against it and the door groaned open, revealing a chamber beyond. Inside, James froze. The room was filled with strange machinery, unlike anything humans had ever seen. Glass tubes lined the walls, each one holding something. He stepped closer, squinting through the foggy glass. Inside each tube floated a being, some half human, some half alien. Twisted experiments, frozen in time. Their faces were a mix of agony and peace, as if caught between life and death. "What is this place?" James whispered, his voice trembling despite himself. The commander stepped beside him, her face hard. "This is the true history of my people, and yours." James turned to her, confused. "Ours?" "Long ago," she said, her voice low. "Our ancestors found your world. They experimented, took samples. Humans were not entirely born of Earth." James's mind reeled. Could it be true? Were humans partly alien? The commander walked to one of the tubes and placed her hand gently against it. Inside, the being stirred slightly, as if sensing her touch. "I was created here," she said quietly. "I was a weapon, designed to conquer or die." James felt the walls close in around him. The scar he had seen on her body. It was not from war. It was from being built piece by piece into something unnatural. "Why show me this?" he asked, his throat dry. "Because you must understand what you are choosing," she said. "You can take the crystal. You can return to your people with gifts, beyond imagination, but you must know the price." James looked around the room again. The beings in the tubes, trapped forever, victims of ambition and war. "Once you carry the knowledge," the commander said, "you will become a target, hunted by those who want the truth buried forever." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Inspect not just my body, human. Inspect my past, my pain, my creation. Only then can you decide if you are worthy." James closed his eyes for a moment, gathering his courage. Then he nodded. Slowly, carefully, the commander removed the last pieces of her armor, standing before him in the soft glow of the ancient room. What James saw shook him to his core. Beneath the surface of her skin, thin lines of living metal traced her veins. Glowing nodes pulsed where muscles should be. Her heart, half organic, half machine, beat with a visible light through her chest. She was alive, yes, but not natural. She was a creation, a masterpiece of science and cruelty. James circled her slowly, inspecting her as she had demanded. Every scar, every seam, every piece of her told a story of suffering and survival. It was not just her body she had offered for inspection. It was her soul. He stopped before her, meeting her eyes. For the first time, he saw something beyond pride and power. He saw fear. She feared rejection. She feared that after everything, after exposing her deepest truths, he would still see her as nothing more than a monster. James understood now. This was the true test. Not whether he could inspect her body, but whether he could accept her. "I see you," he said softly. "All of you." The commander's eyes widened slightly. For a moment, James thought he saw a tear shimmer in the corner of her eye before she blinked it away. The crystal floated between them, its light growing stronger. James knew the choice was still his, but now, the weight of that choice was even greater. In that silent ancient chamber, surrounded by the forgotten tragedies of two civilizations, James prepared to make the most important decision of his life. And somewhere, hidden in the ship's depths, unseen forces stirred, watching, waiting, ready to strike if he chose wrong. Secrets under the skin, the ancient chamber seemed to pulse with a heartbeat of its own as James stood frozen, staring into the commander's eyes. The crystal between them floated, humming softly like a living thing, waiting for a choice he was still too afraid to make. The commander finally turned away, breaking the moment. Without a word, she walked deeper into the chamber, weaving through the rows of frozen beings trapped in glass prisons. "Come," she said, her voice distant, heavy. James followed, each step heavier than the last. The further they moved from the door, the colder the air became. Frost gathered on the edges of the tubes. Strange figures floated inside them, some almost human, others too alien for James to understand. Long limbs, sharp teeth, eyes that seemed to follow him even through the thick glass. "What you see here," the commander said, stopping before a large tube, "are the failures." James looked into the tube and felt his stomach tighten. The creature inside had been twisted beyond recognition. It was as if someone had tried to build a perfect being, and failed horribly. Scars crisscrossed its body. One arm ended in a claw, the other in a stump. Its face was a mask of agony frozen in eternal sleep. "Our creators were not kind," she continued. "They pushed biology beyond its limits. They did not care about the pain, only the results." James tore his eyes away. "Why? Show me this?" The commander turned to him, her face shadowed by the cold blue light. "Because you must know the truth. You must see the blood that built the bridges you now walk across." She moved to another tube. Inside floated a being almost identical to herself, but broken, shattered. Deep wounds marked its chest where metal had failed to bond with flesh. "This was my sister," she said, her voice breaking for the first time. James's heart twisted. There was no anger in her words, only sorrow. Unbearable, raw sorrow. "She did not survive the final trials," the commander whispered. "They called her a failure. They discarded her like trash." James felt the weight of her pain pressing against him, suffocating. He realized now that the scar on the commander's body was not just a mark of survival. It was a memory of all she had lost, and now she was offering him the choice to either stand with her in truth or walk away, leaving her to face it alone. "You think humans are ready for this knowledge?" James asked quietly. The commander laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. "No, but neither are we." She stepped closer to him again, lowering her voice. "There are those among my people who would kill to bury this truth, and there are those among yours who would sell it to the highest bidder. If you accept the crystal, you will become the enemy of both." The lights dimmed around them. A low rumble shook the floor beneath their feet. Danger was coming. James could feel it like a storm gathering just beyond the walls. "They know you are here," the commander said. "They will not let you leave easily." James looked down at the crystal, then up at her. "If I take it," he said slowly, "what happens next?" The commander's eyes gleamed with a mix of sadness and hope. "Then you and I," she said, "must run, together, and fight for the future neither of our worlds want to admit they need." The idea was madness. A human and an alien commander, fugitives hunted across galaxies, alone against governments, armies, entire civilizations. But somewhere deep inside, James knew it was the right thing. He reached out, slowly, carefully, and wrapped his fingers around the glowing crystal. It was warm against his skin, pulsing, in rhythm with his heartbeat. The chamber lights flashed suddenly, alarms blaring in the distance. The commander grabbed his arm, pulling him close. "We must move," she said urgently. "They are coming." Through the distant corridors, James could already hear the sound of marching boots. Not just a few guards, an entire squad. "Where do we go?" he asked, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at his gut. "Follow me," she said, her hand still, gripping his tightly. Together they sprinted through the darkened halls, the ship shaking with the roar of approaching enemies. Behind them, the ancient room with its frozen secrets faded into the darkness. Ahead the unknown waited, full of danger, betrayal, and a slim, fragile hope. James tightened his grip on the crystal, and on the commander's hand, and ran. For the first time he understood. This was not just about peace, it was about survival, and the real war had just begun. A test of trust. The sirens blared louder with every heartbeat. James and the alien commander raced through the twisting corridors of the warship, their footsteps echoing against the metallic walls. Red warning lights flashed overhead, bathing everything in a dangerous glow. James kept his grip tight on the glowing crystal hidden inside his jacket. It felt heavier now, as if it carried the weight of two worlds. Behind them, the sound of boots grew closer. They were being hunted. "This way," the commander hissed, pulling him sharply to the left. They slid through a narrow side passage just as a squad of armored soldiers stormed past the main corridor. James pressed his back against the wall, barely daring to breathe. The commander stood beside him, perfectly still, her purple eyes scanning every shadow. "Why are your own people hunting you?" James whispered. "Because," she said grimly, "truth is more dangerous than war." They moved quickly again, weaving through service tunnels and maintenance shafts. James realized she knew this ship better than anyone. She had been raised here, trained here, and now, betrayed here. Finally, they burst into a hidden chamber deep inside the ship's lower decks. It was small, filled with strange devices humming softly, and a single narrow window looking out into the stars. "We will not be safe for long," the commander said, slamming the door shut and locking it. "They will find us. But first, you must decide." James wiped the sweat from his brow. "Decide what?" The commander stepped close, her face serious. "Whether you truly trust me," she said, "because if you don't, you should give me the crystal now and surrender." James stared at her, his mind spinning. This could be another test, or it could be a trap. How could he trust someone who had admitted to being created as a weapon? The commander seemed to sense his doubt. She removed her gloves and held out her hands, palms up. Her skin shimmered, with faint lines of silver where technology merged with flesh. "I have nothing more to hide," she said quietly. "Inspect me if you must. See me not as a threat, but as a being who chose hope instead of destruction." James hesitated. Memories flooded back, her scar, her frozen sister, the broken experiments. She had lived a life built on pain and betrayal, yet here she was, asking for trust instead of fear. He slowly stepped forward. He placed his hand over hers. Her skin was warm, alive, beating with a strange but steady pulse. There were no weapons hidden beneath, no lies he could sense. Only a fierce, wounded spirit that had survived when everything else had crumbled. "I trust you," James said finally. The commander's shoulders relaxed slightly, a shadow of relief passed through her eyes. "Then listen carefully," she said, lowering her voice even more. "We have only minutes before they break in. We must escape the ship." "How?" James asked, glancing around the small room. She smiled faintly, a flash of that old pride returning. "By doing something no human or alien has ever dared," she said. She tapped a panel on the wall. The floor beneath them shuddered, and part of it slid open to reveal a sleek, one-man escape pod. "Get in," she ordered. James looked at the tiny pod. It looked barely large enough for one, let alone two. "We'll never fit," he said. "We will," she replied firmly. "We must." Outside, the pounding of boots grew louder. Soldiers were gathering, preparing to breach the door. There was no time to argue. James climbed into the pod, squeezing himself into the cramped seat. The commander followed, folding herself into the narrow space beside him. Their bodies pressed, close, the walls barely an inch from their faces. The door to the room exploded behind them as soldiers charged in, weapons raised. "Now!" the commander shouted. She slammed her hand onto the launch button. The pod shot downward like a bullet, crashing through hidden tunnels, dodging detection systems. James felt the pressure crush against his chest. The commander held onto him tightly, her heartbeat matching his own. Through a small viewport, James caught a final glimpse of the alien warship shrinking behind them, alarms flashing like distant fireflies. They had escaped, for now. But as the pod hurtled toward an unknown world below, James knew the real journey had only just begun. Beside him, the commander spoke in a whisper only he could hear. "Trust is not given, human. It is earned, and soon, you will see what that truly means." James closed his eyes, the future rushing toward him faster than he could understand. The test of trust had only begun, and failure was not an option. The price of loyalty. The escape pod shook violently as it entered the atmosphere of an unknown planet. Fire licked the outside shell, and the small space inside grew hotter with every passing second. James gritted his teeth, feeling the pressure crush against him. The commander pressed tightly at his side. "Hold on," she whispered. The pod jolted again, then finally with a loud crash slammed into solid ground. Silence followed, broken only by the hissing of cooling metal and the pounding of James's heart. "We made it," the commander said, her voice hoarse. James pushed open the hatch, coughing as fresh, cool air rushed inside. Above them, 2 suns burned in a violet sky. Strange plants swayed in the breeze, and towering cliffs loomed in the distance. But James had no time to admire the alien beauty. They were still being hunted. The commander pulled him out of the pod, and they stumbled into the tall grass. Above, tiny black dots appeared, ships searching for them. "We have little time," she said. "They will track the pod's crash site." "Where do we go?" James asked, wiping sweat and dirt from his face. The commander pointed toward the cliffs. "There. Natural tunnels. They will hide us if we can reach them first." Without another word, they ran. The ground was rough and uneven, cutting their hands and knees as they scrambled over rocks and fallen trees. James's muscles screamed in protest, but he forced himself to keep moving. Beside him, the commander moved with the grace of a trained warrior, but even she was slowing. They had almost reached the cliffs when James heard it, the distant whine of engines. He turned, seeing sleek black ships descending fast. "They're here," he shouted. The commander grabbed his hand, pulling him into a narrow crevice between the rocks just as the ships unleashed a swarm of hunter drones. James pressed himself against the stone wall, watching the mechanical predators sweep over, the landscape like vultures. "Stay still," the commander whispered. "They sense movement." James barely breathed. One of the drones passed so close he could see its red scanning eye, the barrel of a weapon twitching, ready to fire. Seconds stretched into forever. Finally, the swarm moved on, following false trails deeper into the forest. James exhaled slowly, his heart still hammering against his ribs. "We cannot run forever," he said. "We won't," the commander replied. "But first, you must understand what you are risking." She turned to face him fully, her eyes serious. "By choosing me," she said, "by carrying the crystal, you have betrayed your own kind." James felt the weight of her words settle on his shoulders. "I didn't betray them," he said quietly. "I chose the truth." The commander nodded. "Perhaps, but your leaders will not see it that way. To them, you are now a liability, a danger." James clenched his fists. He had spent his whole life serving Earth, believing in peace, believing in duty. And now, he was the enemy. "What will they do?" he asked. "They will send others," she said. "Ambassadors, soldiers, assassins, all to bring you back or silence you." James closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the cold wind against his face. "Then I will fight," he said. "For the truth. For you." The commander reached out and touched his shoulder, a rare gesture of comfort. "You are brave. Human," she said softly, "braver than most of my kind ever believed possible." Together they moved deeper into the caves, the shadows swallowing them. Inside, the tunnels were narrow and dark, lit only by faint patches of bioluminescent moss. Strange sounds echoed in the distance, the calls of unknown creatures, the whisper of moving water. As they walked, James thought about the price he had already paid. His career, his home, his identity, all gone in a moment of choice. And yet, looking at the commander beside him, he did not regret it. Trust was a heavy burden, loyalty was even heavier. But some things were worth carrying, even if they crushed you in the end. A new dawn for two worlds. The tunnels twisted deeper into the heart of the cliffs. James and the commander moved carefully, guided only by the faint blue glow of the moss along the walls. Above them, the rumble of ships hunting them had faded, but the danger was far from over. They had escaped for now, but escape was not victory. "We cannot stay here forever," James said, his voice echoing softly in the dark. The commander nodded. "No. We must reach the old relay station. It lies beyond these tunnels, hidden among the mountains." "And then?" James asked. "Then," she said, "we send a message not just to Earth, not just to the Federation, to everyone." James frowned. "What message?" The commander stopped walking and turned to him. Her eyes glowed faintly in the darkness. "The truth," she said simply. James felt the crystal pulsing against his chest as if agreeing with her. They pushed forward through narrow passageways and sudden drops. Sometimes they had to crawl through tight spaces. Other times they climbed slippery rocks. The journey was brutal. The planet was wild and unforgiving, and James's body ached with exhaustion. But neither of them spoke of stopping. They reached the surface again just as the twin suns began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and deep purple. Ahead, hidden among the jagged peaks, stood a tall, crumbling tower, the ancient relay station. "We made it," James said, breathing heavily. The commander's face was grim. "Now comes the hard part." They moved quickly, scaling the rocks and reaching the base of the tower. The doors had long rusted away, and inside, dust and broken machinery filled the dark halls. "I will need time to connect the crystal to the transmitter," the commander said, pulling tools from a hidden pouch. "Protect me." James nodded, drawing a small pulse pistol the commander had given him earlier. It felt strange in his hand, heavier than any weapon he had carried before. As the commander worked, James kept watch. The first signs of trouble came quickly. Shadows flickered at the edge of the ruins. Shapes moved silently, figures in black armor sent by both human and alien forces. They had found them. "They're here," James whispered. The commander did not look up. "Buy me 3 minutes, no more." James took position behind a fallen pillar. Just as the first enemy appeared, he fired, the pulse shot striking true, sending the figure crumpling to the ground. But there were more. Dozens, maybe more. They came from every side, moving with deadly purpose. James fought fiercely, his every move fueled by the knowledge that failure meant the death of truth itself. Shots rang out. Dust filled the air. For a moment it felt hopeless. Then a bright pulse of light shot from the relay station, cutting through the chaos. The commander stood at the console, the crystal fully activated. "It's done," she shouted. James fired one last shot, then sprinted toward her. "What now?" he gasped. "Hold on to me," she said. Without warning, she activated a teleportation device hidden inside the crystal's casing. The world twisted around them, light bending and folding. In an instant, they vanished from the battlefield. They reappeared miles away, standing on a high ridge overlooking the ruins. Below, the enemy forces searched desperately, but they were too late. The message had been sent. Every world connected to the relay system would now know the truth about the experiments, about the creation of hybrids, about the corruption that had poisoned both human and alien leaders. There would be chaos. There would be fear, but there would also be a chance for something new. James looked at the commander beside him. Her armor was scorched. Her face was bloodied, but her eyes burned with fierce hope. "We did it," he said softly. "We only began it," she corrected. Together they turned away from the battlefield, walking toward the unknown future. They were fugitives now, hunted by both sides. But they were also something more, symbols of a new dawn. A dawn where truth, however painful, would no longer be buried. A dawn where loyalty was not blind, but chosen. A dawn where a human and an alien, once enemies, could stand side by side and rebuild two broken worlds. Under the twin suns in the endless wild of a forgotten planet, their journey truly began. And somewhere, deep in the hearts of millions who would hear their message, hope stirred for the first time in centuries.